So here is a follow-up question. In that case, is it possible to say arguments is storing the address of this object over here, and parameter, because the call by value is also pointing to this particular object, is it possible to say, rather than modifying the reference over here for the arguments, is it possible to modify the contents of the objects that's pointed by the argument variable? Is it possible by the parameter, through the parameter? The answer is yes. Okay. So the real intention about these three examples I spoke about in this video, 1 and also 2, and the third one I'm going to speak about in a moment, is really for you to see when call by value happens, only the value of the address is copied over to the parameter for the reference type arguments. So that if you try to simply reassign the address, it's not going to have any impacts for the original arguments. But if you try to make some method call, especially mutator method call, you might just be able to mutate or modify the object contents, so that when you try to still use the argument p.x and p.y, they might just have been changed by the alias of the parameter. Right? It's a little bit abstract, but that's exactly what I'm going to illustrate. Hopefully you already understand roughly how I'm going to illustrate the next example. Let's take a look. Okay, the final example here, let's take a look. We're going to focus on this part of the method here, this part. Okay, this is the one. And you can see there is no variable assignments. You can see the parameter over here, we're simply calling mutator, move horizontally and also move vertically, right? So this one will change the y value for, horizontally, right? So this will actually change the x value for the context objects, and this will change the y value for the context objects, which will be an alias to the arguments, as we'll see. All right, let's take a look. Again, let's now visualize it. This one, okay, we don't need to visualize, just create the objects so we can invoke the method. And this one here, let's now create the objects. Okay, let me use a different color here. What about I start with blue? Okay, so we're going to create an object P. So P is going to point to the point objects with 3 and 4. So that'll be very similar to the earlier one, but the real difference is when we try to make the method call by passing the reference, but we'll see. Okay, so it's going to be x and y, 3 and 4. X and y, and then 3 and 4. Okay, let me write a little bit better. 3 and 4. All right, and then let's now go to the next line. We got another reference over here, which is for the same purpose as before. So reference of P before, okay, is going to point to wherever P is pointing to, right? So reference of P before, okay, it's going to point to wherever P is pointing to. We did that, and let's now execute this critical line. We're executing this method here, and we're passing the arguments of value P over here, right? And following the call by value principle, we're going to copy whatever that's stored in P into the parameter, which would be the Q over here, right? So that's the method we are focusing on. So knowing that we're gonna follow the call by value principle, let's now remind ourselves exactly how that would be executed behind the scene at the runtime. So let me now draw the connection. It's going to be from the arguments to the parameter over here, right? Let's write down the principle over here. So call by value is going to execute behind the scene. Is it going to do Q is assigned to P or P is assigned to Q? Well, should be option number 1, right? It should be Q, the parameter is assigned to P. Let's remind yourself. Q is the parameter, and P is the arguments. That's what's going to happen, right? You just need to make sure the order is actually not the reverse one, which will just get it totally wrong. Right, let's now visualize this. Q is assigned to P is going to be what's going to happen for the call by value. Okay, Q is assigned to P. So Q is simply going to point to wherever P is pointing to. All right. So let's say after this, we're going to execute the method line by line. First line, right? You can see the nature of using the parameter is very different. You can see here we are just using Q here as the context object and try to invoke some mutator method to modify the object's attributes. On the other hand, in the earlier example, we are trying to in the early example over here, we are trying to reassign the Q into something which would not do anything, because whatever you do over here is only going to change Q, but not the original P from the caller side. So it's not gonna. So the caller is not going to see any impacts, right? So that's why if you really try to do this, it's really no use. I think that for some programming IDE, I believe Eclipse as well. If you try to do this, they're gonna warn you it's not gonna have any effects on the caller side. It's really important for you to understand it. Okay, let's continue. Now we're going to use the Q as the context object, right? You can see for both cases, Q is the context object. More specifically, the alias to the argument objects. So here I'm being a little bit informal over here. When I say arguments, I really meant the objects that's being pointed by the argument reference, which is P, right? You can see Q is just like an alias to it because we got this particular assignment due to call by value. Okay, so this is an alias. Alias to the argument objects is used as the context objects, and what would that result in? Resulting in the objects, the argument objects, being altered or modified, right? Or just altered. Okay, it's really important to make this note over here. So this there's an alias to the argument objects is used as the context objects, which will result in the objects being altered still. Okay, that's why from the caller side over here we will see that change, right? This is from the caller side. Let me just make a note before we even get into detail. So the caller side is able to observe the change made via the parameter alias. And when I say parameter alias, of course I talk about Q. That's a parameter, right? That's a parameter. Parameter alias is Q. On the other hand, when I say argument objects, I really talk about P. Right? Argument objects, I really talk about P. Alright. Let's now take a look at the method call, right? Let's execute it very quickly. So Q the move horizontally. So horizontally is going to be this method here. Move horizontally is going to modify the X value. So the context object is Q, right? So that means this will be replaced by Q. Q.x plus equal, you can see this is just another call by value. If you think about it, 3, the primitive value, is going to be assigned to the X. So this is just another call by value, just for your information. This is just another call by value. But in the simple case, primitive one. What would that do? It is going to say X is assigned to 3. Right? Oh, actually, I circled the wrong thing. I beg your pardon. Let me just do it again. Let me just do it once more. Just bear with me. Okay, so the call by value is going to be like this. So 3 over here is going to be copied over into X. So this is the call by value. Okay, that's the call by value. And then it's going to be X is assigned to 3. Alright, X is assigned to 3, so that means X here will be 3. So now Q.x is going to be incremented by 3, right? That's exactly what's going to happen. So Q.x is incremented by 3. So that means it's going to be incremented from 3 to 6. Similarly, we're also going to have just another call by value over here, if you can see. This will just be another call by value, and now this time is going to be passed to move vertically into Y. So Y is the arguments, right? So now you can think about, for completeness, we should think about this is simply just another call by value over here. And that one is going to say Y is assigned to 4. The y is the argument. The y is a parameter over here, right? You can see we got 3 instances of the callback value. We start with this, where the callback value, the value is a reference value. In turn, when we try to execute the method line by line, we got another 2 instances of the callback value. This one here, primitive value, and this one here, also primitive value. You want to understand exactly how this works. Okay, good. All right, so after this one will be easy. We simply increment the y value just by 4, right? You can see the y value has been assigned to 4. Okay, so that's going to be incremented from 4 to 8. So that'll be 6 and 8. Good. So after these, you can see we have not reassigned the q into something. We simply use q as an alias to the argument objects. So from the caller side, the caller only got access to the p reference. So now when we try to use the p to check the object status, we'll see all the value have been changed, right, by the method call. Let's now verify that quickly. The first one, p is the same as reference of before. Indeed, you can see this and this, they point to the same object. You can never reassign the reference over here for the argument, because always when you go to the parameter side for the callee, is always a copy is being made. So whenever you want to reassign, you will only reassign this copy here, not this copy. So it's simply impossible, as you can see from the earlier example. Okay, but now it's possible to actually modify the contents of the objects that's being pointed by the argument objects, because the parameter is simply an alias. And using any of the aliases for the same objects, you can definitely modify the same objects. That's also something we saw in the review tutorial series. So that's a nice review we're doing now. Okay, so we say p dot get x, p dot get y. So p dot get x, p dot get y, you can also see. By the way, you can see now p equals q, right? That's obvious because of the callback value assignments. Okay, so p dot x, q dot x, the same. P dot y, and also q dot y, also the same. So they're just same, right? So you can see 6 and 8. So that would definitely pass. All right, so that's about the 3 examples explained in thorough detail. I really hope that you now get a very good feel about callback value. It's not a tricky idea, but it's really something for you to understand exactly what's being done behind the scene. That will definitely help you trace, and also there will be some tricky scenario you have to deal with. For example, later on when we talk about polymorphic assignments, in the case of argument value or parameter value, we need to revisit callback value again. But for now, just understand the 2 sets of examples I spoke about. All right, let's now move on to the next topic.